This conference will now be recorded.
Excuse me, Sunil. Do we need to keep some files opened side by
No,
side
no, no
or
need.
no
No
need,
need to
right?
open
Thank you.
anything.
Okay, thanks.
So you will do the practice once after the class.
Okay,
I'll
okay,
just write
noted.
6 p.m. October and Power Query here. Just giving some name to the file, and we'll start with Power Query, guys. So what is the? This is the first class of Power Query. What is the agenda for today's classes? Power Query class one. Let me copy paste the agenda for today's class. Today is the first class of Power Query. First, we'll just copy paste the agenda for today's class. Today, in the class one, these are the topics we are going to discuss, guys. First topic we will be discussing in today's class is Power Query introduction. The second topic we will be discussing in today's class is Power Query editor user interface. And I'll explain how the data will be processed in the Power Query or how ETL activities will happen in Power Query. And fourth topic we'll talk about is data types. Let's start. So from the introduction class, we already know Power Query is an ETL software in Power BI. Let me go to Power Query is an ETL software in Power BI. And what Power Query will do is Power Query can connect to any kind of data source. It can connect to Excel, it can connect to SQL Server, it can connect to Oracle, it can connect to any kind of data source. And then it can extract the data, transform the data, and that load transformed data it will load into Power Query. That is what Power Query will do. So we already understand that in the introduction classes. Let me write again quickly. Power Query is an ETL software in Power BI. So what we will do with Power Query means, so we already written, let me quickly write, Power Query can connect and extract the data from almost any kind of data source, almost any kind of data source, data sources, comma. Once after connecting and extracting the data from data sources, it can transform the data as per the reporting needs, transform the data as per the reporting needs, reporting needs, and loads the data into Power Pivot. Finally, loads the data into Power Pivot. This is what theoretically Power Query will do. So this is what we will learn for coming 2 weeks of time. Coming 2 weeks of time, we'll understand how to open the Power Query. From Power Query, how to connect to the data sources, how to extract the tables, how to transform the data in the tables, how to load the transformed data into the Power Pivot. This we'll be discussing about 2 weeks of time, guys. Right. This is some basic introduction to Power Query. The next one, how to open Power Query software is, in order to open Power Query, which software you need to open? Power BI Desktop. When I double click on the Power BI Desktop, it will open Power BI Desktop software first. So this is the welcome screen or start screen. We know that we are not going to develop anything here. Just close it. When you close it, you will be landing in the report view of Power BI Desktop, guys. From here, how to open the Power Query software is, we need to go to Home tab. We need to click on a button called what? Transform Data. When you click on Transform Data, it will open the Power Query software. When I click on Transform Data, it open an interface called Power Query Editor User Interface. You know that to open the Power Query software, I need to go to Home tab. In the Home tab, we need to click on Transform Data. Transform Data. When I click on Transform Data, it will open an interface called what? Power Query Editor User Interface. User Interface. In short, you can call it as UI, guys. Power Query Editor User Interface. In short, you can call it as what? UI. Okay. Now, what we'll try to understand is, we'll try to understand this Power Query Editor user interface. That Power Query Editor user interface is the place where we will perform what? ETL activities. So Microsoft provided a separate screen, Power Query Editor user interface screen to do what? ETL activities, guys, to do the ETL activities. Now, how to bring the tables in the ETL? First one is nothing but what? In the ETL, E stands for what? Extracting the data. E stands for extract, T transform, and L stands for load. So first, when you join in the companies, so you want to ask your client what are their data sources. You want to ask your clients what? Data sources. From where you need to bring the data. Some companies, when you join in, some companies they will provide Excel and they'll ask you to generate the reports and visuals. Some companies will provide the data source SQL Server. They'll ask you to generate the reports and visuals. Some companies will provide the data source as Oracle. They might ask you to generate the reports or visuals. Sometimes some companies will provide another data source also, like SAP HANA or some other data source, and they will ask you to generate the reports and visuals, guys. Whatever data source it is, so you will get an idea. So you can able to bring the data. Now the first step in the Power Query is extracting the data. To extract the data from data sources, what option I need to use? New source. We know that to extract the data, we need to click on what? New source. I want to bring some tables from Excel. In order to bring some tables from Excel, click on new source and we need to click on what here? Excel workbook. When I click on Excel workbook, it will open the Excel file and it will show the list of tables you have in the Excel file. So it is opening the Excel file, and when I go to a folder called source files, I'll bring couple of tables from sample superstore first. Click on open, orders table, people's table, and returns table. And I want to bring some more tables from another Excel file. How to bring some more tables from another Excel file? Again, click on new source. Again, we need to click on what? Excel workbook. This time I'll bring couple of tables from EMP, DEPT, Excel. Click on open. I can select employee table, DEPT table, and managers table. Just press OK. I want to bring couple of tables from SQL Server. How to bring couple of tables from SQL Server? New source. You need to click on what? SQL Server. I hope everyone install the SQL Server software. If not, just install the SQL Server software. And we need to give the server name there. And database name is optional here. I can ignore it. Just press OK. When I press OK, it will open the server. It will show the list of database you have in the server. Now, in the last class, we bought the tables from which source? Product database. Expand the product database. Select customers table, products table, and sales data table. Press OK. Fine, guys. Like this, we can bring the tables from data sources to the Power Query. How many tables you bought? I already said that connecting to the data sources, bringing the tables is the matter of few seconds only. Few seconds only. And what is the major work in the Power Query? Transforming the data. Even whatever the tables you bought, loading them into the Power Pivot is also few seconds. Just a click, it will load the data into Power Pivot. Here, the major work is transforming the data. The second thing we are going to understand in the today's class is Power Query Editor user interface. We'll try to understand this Power Query Editor user interface, guys. So for coming 2 weeks of time, we will work in this Power Query Editor user interface only. Coming 2 weeks of time, in this user interface, what you guys will perform? ETL activities. ETL activities you will perform. Right. So that is the reason. First, we'll try to understand this UI. This UI is divided into multiple sections, guys. If you look at here, in this UI, first section I will be talking about is queries pane. What is the first section we will discuss about is this is queries, and this complete one we call it as one queries pane. The second section I will be discussing this is data pane, guys. Before we go there, let me just click on refresh all. First section I'll be discussing about is queries pane. Second section we'll be discussing about is data pane. Third section we'll be discussing about is ribbon. We call it as ribbon. Fourth section we'll be discussing about is query settings pane. And the fifth section we'll be discussing about is a formula bar. This UI is divided into how many parts? This Power Query Editor UI is divided into how many parts? 5 parts. Let's understand each part quickly here. The first part we will be discussing here is in this user interface, we call it as queries pane. Queries pane. Right, what queries pane will contains is in the database, data will be stored in the form of what? Tables. The tables, when it comes to Power Query terminology, we call them as queries. Power Query people, they call the tables as what? Queries. Simple. So in the database, we call them as tables. The same tables, when it comes to Power Query, we call it as what? Queries. What you will find in the queries pane is, queries pane will have list of tables which we bought from the different data sources to the Power Query. Into the Power Query, I bought totally 9 tables. All the 9 tables I can see in the queries pane from different data sources. Tell me how many data sources I used to bring these 9 tables? How many data sources? We call that as 3 data sources, guys. We call that as what? 3 data sources. When I go to view tab, when I click on query dependencies, look at this. In the ribbon, I'm going to which tab now? View tab. In the view tab, you have an option called what? Query dependencies. When I click on this, you can see which table is coming from which source. So if you look at here, first one is Excel. What Excel? Sample Superstore Excel, which is there in the D drive. From that Excel, how many tables you are getting? 3 tables. That means this is one data source. Second one is, this is from another Excel. What is that Excel name? EMP DEPT Excel. From that Excel, how many tables again? 3 more tables. This is the second data source. And lastly, you are bringing the tables from where? SQL Server. How many tables again here? This is the third data source. Totally, we bought the tables from 3 different data sources, guys. How many data sources means? 3 different data sources. Let me write here. Queries pane will contains list of tables which we bought from different data sources, guys. Queries pane will contains list of tables which we brought from different what? Data sources, different data sources. From the different data sources, how many tables you bought? All the tables you can find in the queries pane. Fine, we're done with understanding the queries pane. Second one is data pane. So before you transform the data, first you need to check the data in the table. Let's say in the EMP table, what data is there? I need to check it. In order to check the data, you need to go and select the EMP table in the queries pane. When I select the EMP table in the queries pane, in the data pane, which table data you are seeing now? In the data pane, which table data we are seeing here? EMP table data. Right, data pane will show. So second, this area terminology is important, guys. When I go and select orders table, which table data you are seeing here? Orders table data you are seeing. This is data pane. When I select orders table, you can see what columns you have in the orders table, right? So whether the data is in the proper format or not, you can check it. First you need to check the data, then you can transform the data. Where we can check the data is in where? Data pane. Data pane will show selected table data, guys. Data pane will show selected tables data. So we also call data pane as results pane also. What is the another name for data pane is? We also call it as what? Results pane. Why we call it as results pane is, when I go and perform any transformation in the tables, we can even see the transformed results in the same data pane. Look at this. I have a products data table. In the products data table, I have the product name, English product name. I want to convert this to the uppercase. This product name column, we need to convert it to where? Uppercase. In order to transform this to the uppercase, what we did in the introduction classes, we select the product name column. We went to transform. We went to format. We just click on what? Uppercase. When I click on uppercase, the data, it got added a new step and it got transformed the data to the uppercase. Yes or no? Yes. Where you are seeing the result, transformed results is in the same data pane. In the same data pane, you are seeing the uppercase, product name in the uppercase, results in the uppercase, right? That is the reason we also call data pane as what? Results pane. So we did one more transformation. In the customer data table, we combined first name, middle name, last name to full name. We combined what? First name, middle name, last name to full name. So how we combine first name, middle name, last name to full name is, we selected the first name column, hold the control button, select the middle name column, last name column, and then go to add column, click on merge columns. When I click on merge columns, what is the separator we want is space. What is the new column name is customer full name. As soon as I press OK, you'll get the customer full name. In order to see that customer full name, you need to scroll towards right and you need to see what? Customer full name. Here, you are also seeing the customer full name in the same data pane. So whenever we perform any transformation in the data, once after bringing the tables, we will transform the data in the tables. When you transform the data, The transformed data also you can see in the same data pane. Hence we call it as results pane, guys. Why we call it as results pane means when we perform the transformation on data, we can see the results in the same data pane. When we transform the data in the tables, we can see the results. We can see the results in same data pane. Hence we call as results pane, guys. That is the reason the data pane we also call it as results pane. Okay, fine. The next step is we understand data pane. Third thing we need to understand is ribbon, guys. The most important one here in this Power Query Editor user interface is this ribbon. This top one we call it as ribbon. That ribbon will contain multiple tabs. What is the first tab? Home tab. Second tab, transform, add column tab, view tab, tools tab, help tab. So totally how many tabs you have in the ribbon is 6 tabs. Each tab will have multiple GUI options. Now currently I'm in the home tab. Split column, we call it as one GUI option. Group by, we call it as one GUI option. Use first trace header, we call it as one GUI option. Advanced editor, we call it as GUI option. Generally, each tab will contain dozens of GUI options. Dozens of GUI options will be there. When I even go to transform tab, when I even go to add column tab, you will find dozens of GUI options. In the add column tab, duplicate column is one GUI option. Conditional column is one GUI option. Right, let me write here. The third section we'll be discussing about is ribbon. This is the important one in the Power Query. Ribbon will contains multiple tabs. Contains multiple tabs. And each tab will contains what? GUI options. When you go and check each tab, you'll have dozens of GUI options. And what we will do? We use the GUI options to perform what? ETL activities. We use GUI options to perform ETL activities. Right, guys. In Power Query, in order to perform ETL activities, you don't need to write any code. In Power Query, in order to perform ETL activities, we don't need to write any code. We can perform the ETL activities using which options? GUI options. GUI full form is what? Graphical User Interface Options. So what you need to learn in Power Query is, in Power Query, in each tab, what are the different GUI options we have? That GUI option, what it will do? See, you need to understand each GUI option. There is a GUI option called group by. What is this group by GUI option? When to use it? How to use it? You need to learn, guys. So most of the time we will discuss about every GUI option in the ribbon, guys. Every GUI option we will discuss, right? For now, we understand what is ribbon at a high level. That is the place where we will spend most of the time. That is the third section, guys. Fourth section we'll be talking about is once after the ribbon, the right hand side, you have something called query settings pane. So just let me minimize it. We call it as what? Query settings pane. This query settings pane will contains two sections. First section is what? Properties. Second section is what? Applied steps. Let's talk about what is this query settings pane. Query settings pane. It contains two sections. First section is what? Properties. Second section is applied steps. Applied steps. Properties and applied steps. Let's understand what this properties and applied steps will do. So this is too early to explain about the properties. When you select any table, when I go to properties, there is something called all properties. When I open a window, when I click on all properties, it will open a window. What is this all properties window? What we will do here, we'll discuss later. For now, keep it on hold. This is too early to explain what is this enable load to the report, what is including report refresh. Surely I'll discuss every option in the coming classes, in the Power Query classes only. But this is too early to understand. For now, keep it on hold about properties. Now, important thing is here, what? Applied steps. I'll concentrate on applied steps now. In the query settings pane, important one is applied steps, no doubt in it. So when I go to applied steps applied steps will have list of ETL activities we performed on the selected table. Now currently I selected which table here? Orders table. How many ETL activities, ETL steps are performed? It is telling that 4 steps, guys. Source, navigation, promoted header, change data type. So on orders table, it is telling that we performed 4 ETL activities. I'll come back and I'll discuss them. When I go to sales data table, now currently which table I selected in the query span? Sales data table. Now you are seeing what here? Applied steps. How many steps you have? Source and navigation. It is telling that how many ETL steps we performed on the sales table so far means 2 steps. When I go and select returns table, so when I go to applied steps, how many ETL steps you are seeing? Source, navigation, change data type. So how many steps it is telling that you perform so far? 3 steps. See, let me write here. What applied steps will have is, applied steps will have list of ETL activities you performed on the selected table. Applied steps will record list of ETL activities we performed on selected table. Performed on selected table. Selected table. Okay, look at here. I just go and select one table called returns table. It is telling that on returns table you perform 3 ETL activities. So let me explain one point here. Important point you need to understand is, when I select order, I bought the orders table from which source? Excel. But I have not even performed one ETL activity also. If you remember, I just brought the orders table from Excel. I have not even performed one transformation also so far. One transformation also I have not performed. Even though I am not performing one transformation, how many steps you are seeing? 4 steps you are seeing. That we call it as default steps, guys. When you bring the tables from data sources to the Power Query, some default steps you will get it. Even though in the orders table I have not performed a single step. Look at this. Now I have a customer name column. I mean orders table, I have a customer name column. I need to convert this customer name to uppercase. To convert it, I'm selecting the customer name. We're going to transform, format, click on uppercase. When I click on uppercase, that means I'm performing one transformation here. When I perform one transformation, it will add one new step. Behind that step, it will write some code. It will write the code using which language, guys? Use the G option. Behind the G option, it will write some code. That code it will write using which language? Mashup language code.
Dax.
Mashup language code. Not DAX, guys. Mashup language code. Look at this. When I click on uppercase, customer name got converted to uppercase. It added one fifth step here. Behind that fifth step, it got written some code. That code was written using which language means mashup language. Mashup language or M language. That is the code which will work in the backend to transform the data. Right. Okay. When I do transformation, adding the step is fine. But I just bought the orders table, but you will get some default steps. Right. In the applied steps, what you will have is some default steps you will have it. Default steps. Let me talk about the default steps. So generally in the customer data table, you derived customer full name. It added one step. Okay, I will remove this step again. When I remove this step, I don't have customer full name. But when you bring the customer table from the source, how many default steps you are getting? 2 default steps. In the products data table, I converted the product name to uppercase. It added one third step. Okay, this step is fine. I'll remove it, which I added. But 2 steps you are getting, they are default steps, source and navigation. Like this, when you bring the tables, sometimes you are seeing 4 default steps. When you bring the tables in the people's table, how many default steps you have? 3 steps. When you bring the table customer data table, how many default steps you got? 2 steps. So based on the data source, the steps will change. Mostly when you bring the tables from Excel, you'll find 3 or 4 steps. I'll explain why 3 or 4. When you bring the tables from Excel, how many default steps you'll find? Sometimes 3 or sometimes 4. Why? We'll discuss. Sometimes when you bring the tables from SQL Server, you'll get only how many default steps? Only 2 steps. What is the default steps? Let's quickly understand, guys, here. When I go to orders table, so I want to understand this orders table is coming from which source, guys. So now you remember it. After some time when you open it, you need to know this orders table is coming from which source. This orders table is coming from where? Excel. So which Excel file? If you want to understand in the applied steps, what is the first step you have? Source, guys. When I go to the source step, in the formula bar, this one we call it as formula bar, guys. This one we call it as formula bar. In the formula bar, you can understand this orders table is coming from which source. This orders table is coming from which source? Excel workbook. Where that Excel file is located? D drive, sample superstore Excel. Right. That is the first step. So first step in any table you can find is source. Whether it is coming from Excel, if it is Excel, from which path? Whether it is, if you select even database table, first step is what here? Source. It is coming from where? SQL databases. What is the server name? Well, you connect to the SQL server database, you given the server name. So that source, this table is coming from which source? You can see it in the first step. Orders table is coming from the SQL, this sample superstore Excel, guys. So that Excel contains how many tables? Look at this. I'm going to the source files. I'm opening the sample superstore Excel. If you see that Excel contains how many tables here? Orders, returns, peoples. Three tables are there. Out of these three tables, which table data is this orders table? Sometimes we might even rename this table. Let me right click on the table. Let me click on rename. When I rename it, I can give the table name as ABC. Now I want to understand this ABC table is coming from where? This ABC table is coming from where? I can check it in source. In the source, we understand that it is coming from Excel file called sample superstore. In that Excel file, we have three sheets. Out of these three sheets, this ABC table have data from which sheet? That you can see in where means navigation. What is the second step here? Navigation. This ABC table have the data from which sheet? Orders sheet. Out of these three sheets, that ABC table is coming having the data from where? Order sheet case. The third step is, okay, navigation means in the Excel, which table data or which sheet data you can see it. Third step is what? Promoted headers. Now, when you look at this table, the first row is not data. Row ID, order ID, order date, ship date, all this is not data. They are headers. They are headers. So what Power BI understand is, Power BI understand first row is not data, first row is header. It promoted to the first row to the headers in the third step. How it understand is, only for the first row you have text information. Remaining all the rows you have what type of information here? Number. Only for the first row you have text information here. Remaining all the rows you have what information there? Date. Date. Only for the first row when you have text. Remaining all the rows you have number. Or only first row if you have text. Remaining all the rows if you have different data type. Then Power Query easily sense it. It's not the data. It is the header. It will promote it to the header, guys. It have that intelligence. Right. Third step, it promoted to the header. When you go to the third step, row ID, order date, ship date, they got promoted to the header. Now header is properly populated, data is properly populated here. So when it promoted to the header, for every column, you'll have a data type called ABC123. When I select row ID column, when I go to data type, what is the data type it is showing? Any. Any. ABC123 means any data type. When I go to order ID, what is the data type it is showing? Any. When I go to order date, what is the data type it is showing? Any. By default, it will show any data type for all the columns, but it is not the right data type to the column. We need to give the proper data type to the column. For customer name, what is the right data type here is? What is the right data type for customer name, guys? Text. We need to give the text data type. And when I go to order date, what is the right data type here? Date. When I go to row ID, what is the right data type here? Whole number. Whole number. Like this. So we need to give the proper data type. Even giving the data type also will be done by Power BI automatically. If you see in the third step, it understands that first row is not data, it is header. It is promoting to the header automatically. In the fourth step, what it will do is it will read the data in each column. Based on the data we have in the column, it will go and change the data type. What is the current data type you have for ship date? Any. In the fourth step, what is it is doing? Changing the type. When I go to fourth step, look at here for row ID, what is the data type it given? Whole number. For order ID, what is the data type it given? Text. For order date, what is the data type it given? Date. What it will do is Power Query will read the data in each column. Based on the data we have, it will change the data type of that column, guys. It have that intelligence, right? So let me rename back this table to orders table. I'll just rename it to orders table. Fine. So how many steps you will see when you bring the tables from Excel means mostly 4 steps, guys. Source, I'll repeat one more time. Source, this orders table is coming from which source? Excel. What is the path? You can see it in that Excel. Which sheet data or which table data this orders table contains? You can see in where? Navigation. When I go to navigation, it contains order sheet data. And once it select order sheet data, data is looking like this. The first row is not data, it is header. Third step, it will promote the first row to the header. Once it promote to the header, for every column we have a data type called any. Power Query will read the data in each column and it will change the data type, guys. Okay, now let's go to the people's table. In the people's table, how many steps you have? 3 steps. Orders table also I bought from same Excel. How many default steps you got? 4. People's table also we got from same Excel, but how many steps you are seeing? 3. Why only 3? Why not 4? So let's see which step is missing. What is the first step? Source, navigation, promoted header, and data type. So which step is missing here? So third step is missing.
Promotional header.
Promoted headers. Why it is missing? Promoted headers. Let's check it. First step is this people's table is coming from which source? Again, it is coming from where? Excel. That is sample superstore Excel. Next one is what? Navigation. That people's table contains which sheet data? People's sheet data. Now, when you go here, the first row is not data. Each region have one salesperson. This region and salesperson name is headers. Region name is West and there is one salesperson. Region name is East, there is salesperson. But this region and person is not the data, they are what? Header. Why it is not promoting to the header? Someone tell me. So in the orders table, in the third step, order date is not the data, it is header. It promoted to the header in the third step here. But in the people's table, in the third step, it is not promoting to the header, this person and region. Why it is not promoting to the header? Every data and the header is both are text. If you see here, the first row is text. Remaining rows are what? Date. First row is text. Remaining rows are what? Number. Whenever there is a text for first row, whenever there is some other data for other rows, then it can identify it's a header, it can promote it. But if you see here in the people's table, the first row is text, remaining rows are text. First row is text, remaining rows are text. So it doesn't have any clue that it's a header, right? So you need to remove. Then what it is doing is it is taking the header name as column 1 and column 2, and it is having the data type as what? Any. And in the third step, it is changing the data type. What you need to do is you need to remove the third step now. So before you change the data type, what you need to do is you need to move this first row to where? Header. How to move the first row to header? To move the first row to header, you need to go to home tab, click on what? Use first row as header. When I click on use first row as header, it will not only promoting to header, it got promoted person and region to header. Once it promote, what additional step it is doing? Changing the data type. What it will do is now currently person column have data type as any, region column have data type as any. What it will do is it will read the data in the column and it will change the data type to text. It will read the data in this column and it will change the data type to what? Text. That is the fourth step here, right? In the same way, when you look at the returns table, how many steps again you have? 3 steps. Which step is missing here again? Promoted headers. Same story here also. First step is source. It is getting from where? Excel sample superstore. Second step is navigation. It have which sheet data? Return sheet data. But here again the same problem. First row is text, remaining rows are what? Text. First row is text, remaining rows are what? Text. Actually, this is not the data. It is what? Header. So what you need to do in the third step is you are not supposed to change the data type. Remove that. Before you change the data type, you need to promote this first row to where? Header. To promote the first row to the header, you need to go to home tab, click on what? Use first row as header. Once you promote to the header, then you will get data type to the column as any. That is not recommended to keep it as any. Why it is not recommended to keep it as any, we'll discuss. We need to change the data type. When I go to change data type, it is changing the data type to text. Text. It got given proper data types. When I go to EMP table, how many default steps you have? All the 4 steps. How it is able to promote it to header here means only for the first row you have what? Text. Remaining rows you have what? Number. When you have like that, what it will do? Promote to the headers automatically. And based on the data we have in the column, it will even do what? Change the data type. Mostly you will see 4 steps, guys. Mostly you will see 4 steps. Sometimes you will see 3 steps also. We understand in what scenarios you will see 3 steps. Now when you go and perform any additional ETL activity, It will add one new step, guys. We know that whenever I need to convert the customer name to uppercase, select the customer name, go to the transform tab, format, click on uppercase. We know that whenever we click on any GUI option, it will add one new step here. Behind that new step, it will write some code, mashup language code. That code will transform the data. How many ETL activities you are going to perform? Let's say in the orders table, I will perform 20 ETL activities. Every ETL activity will be recorded here. Even when you perform 20 ETL activities, in applied steps, how many ETL steps you might have? 20 ETL steps you might have it. That is what we written here. So applied steps will record list of ETL activities you performed on selected table, but you will get some default steps, right? Now, when I go to customer data, how many default steps you are getting? Only two. What is that? Source and navigation. Which two steps are missing when you compare with Excel? Promoted headers is missing. Change data type is missing. So why these two steps are missing means when you take the tables from Excel, sorry, when you take the tables from SQL Server, when we create the tables, we'll create with proper headers, proper data, guys. When we create the tables in the SQL Server, the tables will have proper headers, proper data. When you bring the tables from SQL Server to the Power Query, header will get to header, data will get to data. You don't need to separately do that. So SQL Server will have structured formatted tables which have proper header and proper data. When you bring it, you will get it automatically. That is the reason it will not separately promote it to the headers. You will get header to the header automatically, data to the data automatically. You don't need to separately do that. And one more step you are missing is change data type. So when you bring the tables from Excel, in the Excel everything is text. Every column is text. When you bring the data to the Power Query, we need to change the data type to each column. But in the SQL Server, when I create the tables, we will give the first column name and their data type, column 2 and their data type, column 3 and their data type. Understand? In the SQL Server, while creating the tables, we need to give the column names first. Beside that column names, we need to give the data type. Column names and the data type. Column names and data. Every column will give the data type in the SQL Server. When you bring the table from SQL Server to the Power Query, the data types you will get it automatically. Right? In the Excel, everything is what? Text. When it is text, when you bring it to the Power Query, we need to give what? Data type. Even the data type, Power BI developer will not give it. The data type will be automatically assigned by which software? Power Query. By reading the data, it will assign automatically. But when you are bringing the tables from SQL Server, without changing the data types in the Power Query, I'm not changing any data type in the Power Query here. But for customer key, what is the data type you are getting for customer key here? Whole number. For first name, what is the data type you are getting? Text. This data types in SQL Server database, you will have tables. In the tables, you will have columns. Each column will have data type, guys. Each column will have data type. Data type. Column 2 also will have data type. The data types will automatically get it here. That is the reason the two steps you will miss it. Promoted headers. Data types. SQL Server data types. SQL Server database will have tables with proper header and proper data. That header will get to header, data will get to data. You don't need to separately do it. And each column will have data type in the SQL Server. The data types will get automatically. You don't need to do these two additional steps again. Okay. From now, when I go and perform any additional step, it will add the third step, guys. Let's say in the customers table, we combine first name, middle name, last name to full name. When I go and select these three columns, when I go to add column, when I click on merge columns, space and customer full name, when I do that, what it will add this time? When I press OK, it will add which step? Third step. When I press OK, it added one third step. Behind that third step, it is writing some M language code. What is the M language function it is using? Text dot combine. To that function, they are passing which columns? First name, middle name, last name. And what is the separator here? Space. So this M language code work in the back end and will give the result. We already said that behind every GUI options, Microsoft already written the code. Microsoft already written M language code, written mashup language code, M language code. When you use the GUI options, that code will execute and will give the result, guys. When you use the GUI options, that code will execute and give the results. Right. Now, best practice is when you transform the data in the customer table, it is giving a generic name for the step. What is the name for the step it is giving? Inserted merged column. Better to give a proper names to the steps case. Now what I'll do is, instead of having inserted merged column, I'll just right click on it. There is an option called what? Rename. Okay, you inserted a merged column. Which merged column you inserted? Customer full name. When you give a proper name, tomorrow when you come to this step itself, you can understand what you are doing in this step. In the step, what we are doing, guys? We are deriving what? Customer full name. So in the same way, in the products data table, currently product name is in the proper case. I need to convert it to uppercase. To convert it to uppercase, select the product name column, go to transform, format, click on what? Uppercase. It will add one new step. Behind that step, it will write some M language code. That M language code will transform the data. So understand here. So instead of having the default step name, better to do what? Rename it. What is the name you need to give for this step? Right click on it. Click on rename. Okay, you uppercase the text here. Correct. Which text? Product name. So tomorrow when you even perform 20 steps, when you give the names for the each step properly here, you can easily understand in third step you are converting the product name to uppercase, that you can easily remember it. Okay, so it is not mandatory. Best practice I'm telling. So when you perform any step, better to give the proper name to that step. Right, guys? Like this, you'll get some default steps, and on top of that, if you go and perform any additional ETL activity, for every activity it will add one step, guys. Every activity it will add some step. You will understand more about it. For now, in the query settings pane, we talk about what? Update steps. Properties we'll discuss in the later classes. Later classes we'll discuss. The next one is the last section we'll be discussing about is the fifth section, formula bar, guys. The last section we'll be talking about is a formula bar. This one we call it as what? Formula bar. Formula bar. Right. So by default, you will not see the formula bar in the Power Query. One important point you need to understand is, for the first time when you open Power Query, View tab, in the View tab there is one checkbox called what here? Formula bar. Now it is selected, right? By default it was unselected. In the View tab, the formula bar is unselected. Currently, how many sections you have in the Power Query Editor user interface is Queries pane, Data pane, Ribbon, and Query settings pane. How many sections you have currently? Only 4. By default, you will not see a fifth section called what? Formula bar. How to get the formula bar? So go to the View tab and check the formula bar option. When you check the formula bar option, then you'll get the fifth section called formula bar. What is the use of this formula bar is, when you perform any transformation, it will add one step. Behind that step, what M language code Power Query is writing, if you are curious to understand, then you can enable what? Formula bar, guys. It's not mandatory that you need to enable the formula bar, but there are sometimes you combine the customer full name. I want to understand what is the M language code it is writing in the back end to combine that. Where you can check that M language code is in the formula bar. So let me write that point here. The next section is formula bar. Formula bar, by default by default formula bar will not show in the formula bar will not show in Power Query Editor user interface. In Power Query UI, Power Query user interface. So how to get it? To get it, you need to go to Ribbon to get the formula bar. To get the formula bar, you need to go to which tab? View tab. There is a checkbox called what? Formula bar. To get a formula bar, so go to the ribbon. In the ribbon, go to View tab. In the View tab, check formula bar option. Okay. Now, what this formula bar will show is, formula bar will show selected step M language code. Formula bar will show selected step mashup language code or M language code. When you select any step, the corresponding step M language code it will select. I am selecting one step called inserted merged column called customer name column. When I select that step related M language code it will show. In that step, what M language code is writing. I'm going to the products data table. I'm selecting a step called uppercase the text column called product name. When I select it, what M language code it is writing? What is the M language function it is using there? Text dot upper. To that function they are passing which column? English product name. When they pass to that function English product name, that column will be converted to the uppercase. Right. Right. So if you want to see all the steps M language code in one place, let's say there are sometimes a table will have 20 steps. When I go and select one step, I can see only that step M language code in the formula bar. At a time, in the formula bar, you can see only one step. If you want to see 20 steps, you need to go to each step and you need to see the code. Let's say from the order date, I'm going to derive the year. I have a date column. From the date column, I need to derive the year. In order to derive the year, select the order date, go to add column, go to date, click on year. As soon as I click on year, it added one new step called what? Inserted year. Better to rename it. Right click on it, rename. Inserted year from which column? Order date. You can give some user friendly name here, order date. Like this, in the formula bar, when you select one step, you can see only that step M language code. When you go to next step M language code, you can see. So if you have 20 steps, you need to go and see each step separately 20 times here. Instead of that, is there any place where I can see all the steps M language code at once? Means in the home tab, there is some option called GUI option called what? Advanced data. I selected which table now here? Orders table. How many steps you have is 6 steps totally. In order to see all the 6 steps M language code, just go to the home tab, click on which button? Advanced data. When I click on advanced data, how many steps M language code you can see is source, navigation, promoted headers, changed data type, uppercase the text called customer name, then inserted the year from where? Order date. So all the 6 steps are you seeing here or not? In one place. Let me write that point also, last point. So once after the formula bar, 6th step we'll be understanding is advanced editor. Advanced editor will show all the steps M language code. All the formula bar will show how many steps M language code? Only one step. Advanced editor will show what? All the steps M language code. Right, guys. This is all about the Power Query editor user interface, guys. Today we're done with some introduction to Power Query and then we're done with Power Query editor user interface. So terminology is important. Tomorrow when you go for an interview, they'll ask you to combine the first name, middle name, last name to full name. Where do we have the option? In Power Query, to combine the first name, middle name, last name to full name, where do we have the option? They'll ask you. You need to tell with the terminology. You need to tell that we need to go to where? Ribbon. We need to go to where to see that option? Ribbon. In the ribbon, we need to go to where? Add column tab. In the add column tab, we need to use a GUI option called what? Merge columns. If you know the navigation, if you know the terminology, then explaining to the interviewer is easy. Why we spend around some 20 to 30 minutes of time to understand this user interfaces? When you know the terminology, explaining the things to the other person is easy. Even for me to explain anything to you, it is easy. Even for you to explain something to the interviewer, it is easy. Okay, terminology is important. Don't take it light. So people will think that this is completely theoretical. Why he is explaining this much time? Without this, you cannot explain anything to your interviewer. Okay. The next one is, once after this, we'll talk about what? Data processing. So how the data will be processed in the Power Query or how the ETL activities will happen in the Power Query, we'll discuss, guys. Data processing. We also call it as how the ETL activities will, how data will be processed in the Power Query, how data will be processed in Power Query, or how ETL activities will happen in Power Query, how ETL activities will happens in the Power Query. Right. This we call it as data processing. As in simple, I'm calling it as in Power Query how the data processing will happen. In Power Query how data will be processed or ETL activities will happen. We'll discuss now. So to explain this, instead of typing it, I'll copy paste it and I'll explain, guys. I'll just copy paste it quickly and I'll explain it. Let me copy paste this. how the data will be processed in the Power Query. I'll just copy paste the steps and I'll explain this. Right. First point you need to remember is when you connect to any data source, when you bring the tables to the Power Query, it will bring the table and it will bring first 1000 rows in the table, guys. It will bring the table, and how many rows it will bring from the table is only 1000 rows. Let's say in the Excel table, I have a table called orders. In Excel, we have a tables called what? Orders. The table have how many rows means 9994 rows. But initially, when you bring the orders table from Excel to Power Query, that orders table will come to the Power Query, but it will get only first 1000 rows. How many rows it will bring? Only 1000 rows. But in the source, how many rows you have? 9994 rows. Even though when you have 9994 rows, when you bring it, it will show only first 1000 rows, guys. Only it will show how many rows? First 1000 rows. Okay, that is the first step you need to remember. So SQL Server have a table called sales table. SQL Server have one table called what? Sales. That sales table have 100 million records. How many records you have? 100 million records are there. Even though the sales table have 100 million records, when you bring the sales table to the Power Query initially, it will bring the sales table to the Power Query and it will bring only first 1000 rows initially. How many rows it will bring initially? Only 1000 rows. That is the first point I written, guys, here. When we bring the tables from any data source, whether it is Excel or whether it is SQL Server, when you bring the tables from any data source to the Power Query, it will bring tables and what? First 1000 rows to the Power Query. Whatever the row count you have in the source, it will bring only 1000 rows. And second step is, once after bringing the tables, what is the next step you will do? So now when I bring the orders table, how many rows it bought? Only 1000 rows. When I bring the sales data table, how many rows it bought? So from whatever the source it is, when you bring the tables, initially it will bring the tables and it will bring only 1000 rows only. Once after bringing the 1000 rows, when you go and perform any transformations in the Power Query now, initially Power Query will transform the data on how many rows? 1000 rows only. Initially, Power Query will transform the data in 1000 rows. That is the reason, even though we have a sales table, even though that sales table have 100 million records, 100 million records, when you bring the sales table to the Power Query, within few seconds you will get it. Why it will get within few seconds here is, even though it have 100 million records, it will bring how many records to Power Query initially? Only 1000 records. Going to the sales table, bringing the 1000 records will not take much time. Fraction of seconds it can bring it. But from the sales table, if you want to bring 100 million records, you need to wait for 3, 4, 5 minutes of time. Why? Because it need to go to the sales table, it need to bring 100 million records. It takes lot of time. But if you observe, when I bring the tables from any data source, it is not taking time. It is bringing the tables within few seconds. The reason is it will bring only 1000 rows. Once after bringing the tables, even when you transform the data, it will not take time. In the customer data table or products data table, in the products data table, when I select the product name column, when I go to transform, when I go to format, when I click on uppercase, it doesn't take time. Within fraction of seconds, it is giving the uppercase. How it is able to transform the data within fraction of seconds means, initially it will transform the data on how many rows? Only 1000 rows. Transforming the 1000 rows will not take much time. But if there is a sales table with 100 million rows, transforming the data on 100 million rows might take time. But initially, it will bring only 1000 rows. Initially, Power Query will transform the data on how many rows? 1000 rows, guys. But when the actual ETL process will happen is, so when you click on new source, when you bring the tables, it will bring only 1000 rows. When you transform the data, it will transform the data only on the 1000 rows. This is not the actual transformation. Actual transformation will happen when you click on what? Close and apply. You bought some tables. You are done with transforming the data in the tables. First, you bought only 1000 rows. On the 1000 rows, you transform the data. Then, so if you, in order to load the data to Power Pivot, in order to load the transformer tables to Power Pivot, you need to click on what? Close and apply. When you click on close and apply, that time actual ETL process will happen, guys. Understand an important point? As soon as you click on close and apply, Power Query again will go to the sources. Power Query again will go to where? Sources. This time it will bring the complete data. When you click on close and apply, Power Query will again go to the sources. This time it will bring what? Complete data. On that complete data, it will perform all these steps. And that result it will load into Power Query. and that result it will load into PowerPoint. So when I click on close and apply in the real time, it might even take 20 minutes of time also. What might be the reason, guys? When you click on close and apply in the real time when you are working in the projects, it will take 20 minutes also. What might be the reason? It need to again want to go to where? Sources. It need to bring what this time? Complete data. On the complete data, it need to perform what? Transformations. And the transformed data, it need to load into where? PowerPoint. This is the place where actual ETL process will happen. So when sales table is having 100 million records, initially it will bring only 1000 records. When you transform, it will transform only 1000 records. When you click on close and apply, again it will go to the source. This time it will bring 100 million records. Then 100 million records, it will perform these transformations, and that result it will load into PowerPoint. That is what we written last point here. When we click on close and apply, Power Query will bring all the data and transform it and load it into where? PowerPoint. Actual ETL process will happen when we click on what? Close and apply. When I click on new source, when you bring the tables, it will not take time. When you go to the table, when you transform the data, it will not take time. But initially, it will transform the data on 1000 rows, it will not take time. But when you click on close and apply, in the real time, it will take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes based on the volumes of data you have in the source. If your source have more data, when you click on close and apply, it will take more time to load into PowerPoint. When your source have less data, when you click on close and apply, it will take less time to load the data into PowerPoint. Now, when I go and click on close and apply here, look at here. When I click on close and apply, it is taking time. This is the place where it will go to backend database. It will bring the complete data, it will transform it, and it will load it. Now tell me, in the orders table, now you will have 1000 tables. Now you are in Power Pivot. In the Power Pivot, you have orders table. In the orders table, currently, tell me you will have only 1000 records or 9994 records.
1000.
Complete 9994 records. It will transform the data on 1000 rows or complete data now. Complete data. Even though initially when it bring 1000 rows, when I click on close and apply, it will again go to the source. It will bring the complete data and it will transform it. It will load it. So then why it is initially bringing only 1000 rows is, so generally when you bring the table, we might even perform 20, 30 ETL activities. When you bring 100 million records, to perform each ETL activity, you need to wait for few seconds. First ETL activity, few seconds. Why? Because it need to transform the data on 100 million records. Second ETL activity, few more seconds. Third ETL activity. Between each step, you need to wait for some time. To avoid that, when you bring only 1000 rows, when you do the ETL step, it will perform quickly. But later on, once you are done with all your ETL activities, when I click on close and apply, so it's a one-time activity. I might wait for 10 minutes one time. So in the 10 minutes, I can go out, I can have a coffee and I can come back. Right? Between each step, when it is taking time, then it is difficult. Developer will lose the interest. So all the steps you are done. When you click on close and apply, so all you bought all the tables, you are done with transformations. When I click on close and apply, let it take 10 minutes. I'll go out and I'll come back after 10 minutes. By that time, all the data will be transformed and the result will be loaded into where? Power Pivot, guys. Right? This is how the data will be processed in the Power Query. So to answer some important interview questions in the Power Query, you need to know what happens internally, guys. This is completely an internal mechanism. What is happening? To answer some important questions in the interview, better to have an idea how the data will be processed in the Power Query. This is what about today's class. And what is the next topic we need to talk about? Data types. I'll stop here for today. About data types, we'll discuss in tomorrow's class, guys. About the data types, I'll discuss in class 2. Tomorrow's class is class 2. We'll talk about what? Data types. So we'll go with some questions now.